Welcome to Brainstoryum. I'm Anna Tizard, award-winning dreampunk and deeply weird fantasy author, and yes, that's me and my fiction that's deeply weird. Explore and imagine with me the most unexpected story ideas using the surrealist word game of Exquisite Corpse. Find out more and join in at annatizard.com. This is a storytelling challenge unlike anything you've tried before. Hello, imaginative people. I'm Anna Tizard, and this is episode 60 of Brainstoryum. 60? Really? It's hard to believe. So many journeys down the rabbit hole, and yet each one has been different, unique. Well, I guess that's the magic of Exquisite Corpse, and there is a certain magic in dedicating a little bit of time to randomness and pure imagination on a regular basis. Long may it continue. Well, in the last few episodes, I've been digging deep into the mysterious process of discovery writing and the workings of the unconscious mind. Well, this time, the whimsical meanderings will be down the pathway of ideas, the story ideas of my fantastic imaginative listeners, because I've had so many responses about the writing prompt that I shared at the end of episode 59 that this is going to take up the first chunk of the show. I must dedicate it to that. And they're so good. I want to delve into each of them a little bit and wonder what's next or what you might do with these ideas if you were to take them that bit further. So let's do that before we turn our attention to even more story ideas. In the last show, the prompt I prompted you on was the brittle cartographer, and I wondered aloud whether it was the map maker who is brittle here, or if the skill or art form of map making or map drawing might be brittle in some way. Well, your interpretations went well beyond this simple question. Rebecca Bennison, travel thriller writer, said, "The first thing that comes to mind is a teenager with brittle bone disease, confined mostly to bed, with a merchant father who tells him about the world through his travels. The child draws scenes as he imagines them and maps the world from his father's description." I imagine that could be very moving, and in a way it's very easy to relate to this teenage character in that he's experiencing places through his imagination, which is very much like reading and writing. He's co-creating something. I wonder where you could take this. Maybe the map is or becomes magical, and he can find his way into these places or invent new ones, better places than the ones his father describes, in which he can travel to through dreams or by the map becoming a kind of portal. Thank you so much, Rebecca, for sharing your idea. Jan Miklazevich, who writes poems and short stories, said, "She makes maps for intrepid adventurers to explore new worlds, but these maps are inextricably linked to her emotional well-being. You must bring her along on your quest, keep her sweet, and hope for the best." A very different character idea here. I feel like it's the mood or the temperament of the cartographer which is brittle. It feels a little dangerous. You can travel through magical worlds, but she must accompany you, and whatever you do, don't upset her. Is she a kind of goddess? Will she go with you in disguise, pretending to be a princess, or even your assistant? Just be careful how you treat her along the way. If she gets angry, will there be an earthquake or worse? Fascinating idea. Thank you, Jan. It's given me lots to think about. T.F. Burke, who writes poetry and lyrics, said, "He got his map-making abilities from a witch, and every map he makes, he loses a piece of himself." Well, this one is ripe with possibilities. Immediately, the conflict is apparent. For some reason, this person is compelled to draw maps, but every time he does, he loses a piece of himself. What would that be? A memory? A part of his life? His connection to a friend or family member? So that each time he draws a map, someone close to him forgets all about him? That would be extremely cruel. But why must he draw these maps? There must have been a deal he struck with the witch, and she's tricked him into it, or created this punishing loophole which he didn't foresee. And the reason this witch is torturing this man? It might be that she just saw someone with incredible imagination or talent, and knew that he would be capable of performing amazing magic if she gifted him with this skill. And as for him losing a part of himself each time, that's just her insurance against him becoming famous for his skill and gaining from it himself, because everyone forgets him. Maybe he disappears into the last map he makes, just as his real life fades away. But surely there'd be a way for him to get his revenge from his new life inside this country he created through his drawings. He just has to lure her there for a visit. Thank you, T.F. Burke. That one has really sent me down a rabbit hole of ideas. Well, G. Gregory Darnley, sci-fi writer, said, "A defeated, ready-to-give-up man works his way through life and tough situations. He himself is brittle, but works his way to overcoming that. He becomes the cartographer of his life." It could be a small, focused, and very human story about taking control of life. Or when I asked G if the map would be real or metaphorical or a bit of both, he replied, "The project that begins to inspire him could be a hobby of map drawing, so it can be a literal start point that inspires the metaphorical." Well, I do love stories that have a strong psychological thread running alongside and interweaving with the action. There's a lot of different ways you could write this one, and I agree it would be a personal story focused mainly on one life, one person's struggle. I think it's really a case of what those struggles are and how you want to build this metaphor. Thinking around this, I can't help but wonder, a map of someone's life is more 3D than your average map because parts of yourself, your experiences, your memories, are connected with times in your life, not just places. So to view a part of the map is to view another time as well as a set of emotions, the place where a life event happened. So it's kind of like space-time, only on I don't know how many dimensions. This is a deep thinking one. Thank you for sharing your idea, G. Nick Vrakar, who writes urban and contemporary fantasy with a splash of horror, said, "The museum guide had maps made by him. It was a delicate thing making a map for an astronomy museum in which every room constantly shifted its perspective of the stars. But he couldn't be bothered to explain his map, and every additional question brought him closer to weeping." And I asked, "Nick, do we know the reason for his tears?" To which he responded, "Pride. He put a lot of effort into designing the perfect static document to reflect a dynamic exhibit, and nobody can understand. Any attack on the design of the map is an attack on his character, and he's never had to defend his character before." So I'm picking up we have a bit of a recluse character, perhaps, with this museum guide, or someone who's quite precious about this particular hobby and who doesn't like to be criticised. Maybe he's attempting to do the impossible, and he's becoming fractious as he begins to realise that. His map was meant to be a welcome addition to the museum, a helpful facility, but people don't understand it. Frustration sets in, and whenever frustration gets too much, change has to happen. But what? Is there magic in this? Is there some kind of intervention that will make it worse to start with and then better? If these map-making skills are imbued with magic and he hasn't quite got to grips with it yet, it might be a learning curve. I always think that's a very enjoyable element in any story where the protagonist has to be trained up on something, like magic, especially if there's a big purpose they're working towards. But that would suit a longer story. So for me, if I tried writing this as a novella or a novel, I would want to puzzle out what is this grander purpose he needs to fulfill. But equally, I do like the idea of this from a short story perspective. Then all you really need is to focus on exquisite detail, a bit of mystery, and some kind of twist. Thank you for your idea, Nick. Do let me know if you ever write it. Erin McConnell, a multi-genre author, wrote, "The queue stretched for miles. Wren sighed as she turned to the eager face in front of her. 'Some wait days to see you,' the old woman whispered to her. 'You're famous.' Eyes flicked to Wren's palm and the pen beside it. 'I want to see my old home again, before I was taken and indentured. I want to see the mountains. Can you do that?' A vision flashed before Wren's eyes of a crowd of people forced along, crying, and the lilac mountains wept. The old woman spoke truth then. Wren took up the pencil and drew onto her skin, letting the map etch in lines of red. The old woman gasped and wept. The map shivered and furled up at the edges as it climbed away from Wren's skin. The old woman eyed it with longing. 'Take it, but be careful. It doesn't last long.' The old woman met her eyes. 'Neither will you if you give too much.' Wren shrugged. 'They wait.' Wow, thank you, Erin, for this glimpse into a scene that feels quite cinematic. And the idea of someone, a kind of witch perhaps, or a visionary, etching a map into her own skin, which then peels away as parchment, which she can give away. A magic parchment that can take you to that place that she's just drawn. So this is a real visceral connection with maps. Fascinating stuff. Thank you for sharing that, Erin. Chow Puppy, also known as Dean, who is pitching a TV pilot using homemade storyboards rather than formal scripts, an unusual project, suggested a person who makes maps out of peanut brittle instead of paper or parchment. So you've got to have a humorous piece as well. You know, it can't all be serious. He also said, after you figure out how to reach your destination, you can eat the yummy map. Also, the map has a very 3D feel. Yes, indeed, that is a 3D map. That would be a very 3D map. You've also made me feel quite hungry. But this is an intriguing idea. I mean, what if you could eat your destination? Or what if that was how you get there? There's a portal I can really get on board with. That's some special baking. Thank you, Dean. Right. Well, I hope your imagination is fully warmed up now. That is no less than 7 story brainstorms, and we haven't even got started on the new ones. So as we reach for the socks of destiny for new inspiration, do not forget, I am not the only one in possession of a pause button. You too have access to this magic. It's all part of the process. The imagination blossoms when it is given time and space. If an idea starts to tingle at any time, please use the pause button. I feel like I don't say this often enough. Jot down ideas as they come to you. Make a start. Nothing has to be perfect. In fact, the word draft is very close to the word daft, for good reason. It is allowed to be scrappy, patchy, and to not necessarily make a whole lot of sense in its early stages. And I know from experience as well that if 1,000 people tried writing any one of these story ideas, you would get 1,000 different stories out of them, substantially different. Everyone's interpretations and writing styles are different, so do not worry about the fact that others may end up working from the same writing prompt. I guarantee you they will be totally different. So, without further ado, let us reach into the socks of destiny. That's right. And for those who haven't listened before, or maybe can't remember, it's been a while, Exquisite Corpse brings together a variety of different words and phrases by mixing listeners' words into a sentence that goes describing word, noun, action, describing word, noun. So first I am reaching into the describing word sock. And we have a word from Blue Wizard Facts, also known as Sean. Rose-scented. Okay, let's try for a noun. This is from Robin the Mail Lady. Swamp. We have a rose-scented swamp. Well, they can get gassy, so maybe someone's scattered rose petals over it in the hope of improving the smell. Let's try for an action. This is from XID Iggy_RB. Planned. Oh my goodness. If the swamp plans something, are we looking at a sentient swamp here? Let's try it for another word. We have another describing word. This is from Sean again, Blue Wizard Facts. Effervescent. So sort of bubbly. That's interesting because a swamp can bubble. And a final word, final noun is from Robin the Mail Lady again. Wild hog. Right, I'm just going to read the entire Exquisite Corpse. We will get there, okay? Just got to have a little bit of faith. So this is the rose-scented swamp planned the effervescent wild hog. So as I was saying, if a swamp is planning something, it's possible we might be looking at a sentient swamp. I mean, at first I was thinking, no way. But now, I mean, I do quite like the idea of a place being sentient, having a think, making plans. But let's just hold fire here and look at other options before I start diving into something that weird. Another idea is that a rose-scented swamp is part of a plan about a wild hog. But what? Trapping a wild hog? Why? Or some kind of trickery? I feel like what this plan is a big detail we're missing and which needs to be invented to make sense of this. But there is a connection here between the swamp, which has been rose-scented to disguise its smell, and the word effervescent, which swamps sometimes are. Bubbling. Let me think on this. Actually, I think this might be time to pour some green tea. So let's just try this. Right. See if that makes any difference. Come on, inspiration. So, who lives on the edge of a swamp? Who would scatter rose petals onto it? For some reason, I'm thinking about a defective wizard. One who's gone into hiding, shamed from his community. He's gone to live in a hut by a swamp, an outback no one wants to touch with a barge stick, or any other kind of stick for that matter. There he is in his dressing gown, bare feet squished into the mud outside his hut. "You may throw sticks and stones," he muttered, then stopped. He couldn't remember how the phrase went. Like so many well-worn facts held inside his brain, the memory was like a collapsing pathway, and as his thoughts tiptoed up it, more stones slipped out and sploshed into the swamp below. Not literally, of course, but something about this swamp was rotting his mind. Or was it just living here on his own, utterly isolated? He opened his mouth, showing yellowed teeth, which no one was around to see, so it hardly mattered, and tried again. "You may throw sticks and stones, but they'll all get sucked into the swamp." At this, he threw back his head and cackled. But a wet slapping noise made him stop and look down. By the edge of the stinking swamp, a wild hog was snuffling for roots or bugs, anything it could eat. During the last couple of weeks, the hog had been the wizard's only companion, daring itself closer to the hut every day in the hope of catching some scraps. But any sense of companionship was not reciprocated by the wizard. "Yuck, don't eat the stuff. Get away," the wizard shouted. The area of bog that the hog was snuffling and slurping at had formed a new layer of sludge. It was where he'd thrown some rose water last night, the leftovers from an experiment he'd tried and failed to make the place sweeter scented. But he didn't have to say shoo more than once. Before his blinking, disbelieving eyes, the hog had begun to swell and bloat. With gas? Something from the swamp, maybe? His experiment. His gaze flicked to the puddle of muddy rosewater before staring wildly at the hog as it levitated. The hog's short legs wiggled and kicked against empty air. Galloping against nothing, the creature managed to shunt towards the wizard, rolling its eyes in panic as if it expected the man to help. But the wizard had other ideas. He jumped up, grabbing the hog's feet as it squealed, not caring that he was wearing his greyest, holiest underwear, for up they were going, hog and wizard. As a soft breeze buffeted them towards the clouds, they would soon be higher than anyone could see, that clearly. The sun wasn't fully up yet, anyway. Who'd have known that all these months he'd been living right on top of the most powerful natural potion? Essence of swamp mixed with rosewater. The wind ruffled his dressing gown like a cape, and the long strands of white hair at the nape of his neck. He marvelled at the pine trees passing below, though their spiky protrusions made him wince and curl his toes. Above him, the wild hog wheezed and wriggled dangerously, but the wizard hardened his heart and his grip, and on they sailed into a grapefruit pink sunrise. What next? Does he travel the world? I think he wants revenge on those who threw him out of his wizarding society. He won't be travelling for long using the wild hog. As soon as it's on the ground again, the hog will run off after its traumatic experience and never go near a biped again. Tentatively, the wizard will test the newfound potion on himself, adjust the dosage and proportions, and bottle it. And he will wash his underwear just in case. He has a nice cloak back at the hut, but it would be a bit flappy and cold, not really suitable for flying. But he might adapt it into a suit he can wear with pride. And off he goes. I do love stories that involve flying. When I was a kid, I used to read these books called the Little Vampire series by Angela Summer Bodenberg, and they weren't particularly scary or anything, but there was this ongoing tension as the main human boy character struggled to keep his vampire friend's secret from his parents. And then there was the flying using a cape which had been magicked with a mysterious substance. Flying is just one of those fascinating forms of magic, uplifting, literally and otherwise. Next, I think it's time for another exquisite corpse. Our first describing word is from Mariah, laughing. Okay, who or what is laughing? Our noun is from Paul Thomas, chest. Is that the chest of a person? Because usually you get a belly laugh, but you can also get, I suppose, a chesty laugh, which might turn into a cough, I guess. Or is it a treasure chest that's laughing? Or a chest that has clothes in it, or not sure. Okay, so the action is from Honor Harlow, winked at. Okay, I'm gonna move on to see if the next couple of words will help make sense of this. Our next describing word is from Paul Thomas again, blood-fueled. Often think about a blood feud, but that's a noun, whereas this is blood-fueled. I'm not quite sure what that might be. It's making me think we have a vampire in our midst. So let's just see if it is a vampire, and if so, what kind? So our noun, to tie this off, is from Rebecca Gleisner, dairymaid. Oh, okay. God. I'm gonna read the entire Exquisite Corpse. First, the laughing chest winked at the blood-fueled dairymaid. I'm getting so much colourful imagery here. A treasure chest tipping back its lid to laugh. And on the other side, a blood-fueled dairymaid, which in my mind has to be a kind of vampire. A particularly creepy and unexpected vampire because, well, a woman who lives a simple but hardy life, working on a farm, it seems like an honest, down-to-earth kind of life. Dairymaid implies a more traditional and caring form of farming, especially compared to modern-day mass production. This is an old-fashioned farm, and we expect old-fashioned values. A gentle pace of life. An innocent, pretty dairymaid, though with all the lifting and carrying she does, there's good solid muscle hidden under those frilly white sleeves. Has any dairymaid ever actually worn frilly white sleeves, except in the stories? Well, this one does. This one considers herself to be the most dangerous fairy tale there is. Last night, she drank the blood of a visitor. For the farm is rather remote in a quaint little English village far from anywhere. In fact, you have to get slightly lost and go beyond the reach of your sat-nav connection in order to find yourself driving up that path and through the gates to where you are welcomed to a little B&B, a cottage just for visitors. And no, that front door doesn't lock properly. It hasn't for some years, but what's the worry? This place is so remote, there's zero crime, and the only deaths in the last few years have been a gentle, quiet passing in the sleep, like that poor dear old man last night. Isn't it terrible? But not to worry, we've cleaned the place thoroughly and it's all ready for you to come and sleep in tonight. Won't you come in and have a cup of tea? You've travelled so far, you must be exhausted. Ooh, I'm reminded suddenly of a suggestion made by Nick Vrakar in the last show. It was completely different in subject matter based on the quivering silhouette, but the style of writing was like the narrator speaking directly to you as if you are a character in the story, second person. Clearly, this has played on my mind and wound its way into my subconscious and then crawled out again in the form of this creepy narrative. But coming back to this exquisite corpse, the laughing chest winked at the blood-fueled dairymaid. What about this laughing chest? Winked at implies someone or something conspiring with the dairymaid. Does she keep a chest where she hides things? Maybe objects or money stolen from the people she kills. Maybe she likes to collect these things, a little memento of her kills. And maybe there's a scene where her new victim stumbles upon this chest and finds bunches of keys, passports, jewellery, and starts to read the signs of what's going on. I like this idea. It's rather creepy. Time for another exquisite corpse. Let's reach into the socks again. So our first describing word is from Rebecca Gleisner. Buoyant. Okay. So someone floating in water. Next word, our noun, is from Iggy_RB. This is really specific. Spaceship mechanic from 2150. Okay. Let's try something from the action sock. This is again from Rebecca Gleisner. Cooked for. Okay. So we've got a chef or someone just cooking a meal for friends. In space, I don't know. Next word is from Wendy. Intoxicating. I first read that as intoxicated. But that would depend on, who's cooking for you and what they've put in it. But no, intoxicating. Let's try a final word, which is from Mariah. Box. Ooh, the intoxicating box. There's a kind of music to that. Is it a music box? Ooh, so much going on. Okay, put down the sock. Take a deep breath. Take a swig of tea. Oh, I don't mind if I do. Okay, let's try this. So, the entire exquisite corpse is the buoyant spaceship mechanic from 2150 cooked for the intoxicating box. Blimey. Okay, let's just think about the first part first. So buoyant means able to keep afloat, which by definition, technically, I think that means someone in water or some kind of liquid. But I think I'm going to have to be a bit creative about this one because I can picture it already. A spaceship mechanic who is floating slightly. Oh, this is weird. I've only just realised that we've already had a floating character in this show in the form of a magicked wild hog and a wizard clinging to its legs. But this new idea is very different. So give me a moment. I'm imagining a spaceship mechanic who has returned from the future and is trying to hide the fact that he is from the future. In fact, his job, possibly even his life, depends upon him keeping this secret, top secret information about the ability to time travel and how a spaceship can be tweaked with some very special techniques or gadgetry to time travel. Because, of course, there is such a thing as the space-time continuum. So why shouldn't space travel also be time travel? I'm sure this idea is not new for sci-fi writers and readers out there. But years of working with these technologies, and possibly with a special oil he's been using to lubricate cogs and wheels of the less digital underbelly of the machinery, and which he's never quite been able to wash out from under his fingernails, has caused him to float, to be buoyant, but in air. It's a strange side effect. Going downstairs is the hardest. He has to wear very heavy strap-on boots, which are designed to not look like heavy strap-on boots. Maybe they're just military-style tie-ups, but with a metal plate embedded deep inside the thick soles. But what if he has a date? What if he comes round to his newish girlfriend's place and she wants to protect her nice new carpet? Take your boots off. Well, that's the end of that relationship. He can't take that risk. Unless he has some other way, some other trick he's worked out to keep his feet on the ground. He knocks on her door with a bunch of flowers in one hand, a bottle of wine in the other, and he's fine to take off his shoes because underneath his jeans he's got long, thin weights which are perfectly contoured to his calves, bound in specially made elasticated sleeves, or I suppose you'd call them socks. And so we have the beginnings of a sci-fi comedy, a futuristic romantic comedy with slapstick potential. Maybe during their dinner his legs start to itch and she keeps throwing him odd looks. But the situation would be more ripe for comedy if this is a visit to his potential in-laws, to her parents. A whole other layer of tension awaits us, mainly because of what is left unsaid. As if it was just in her own home, the two of them, the girlfriend would ask him outright what was making him fidgety. In her parents' home, she's all about keeping up appearances and throws him glares over the tomato soup, which naturally is rather thin and splashy. Oh, and for some reason, he's agreed to cook for them, because the buoyant spaceship mechanic from 2150 cooked for, well, we haven't even come to the intoxicating box yet. What is that? Oh, maybe this is some mechanical part from the spaceship he worked on most recently, back in 2150. And it is or has become sentient. There's something intoxicating about it. It's such a beautiful, iridescent blue. And ever since he slipped it into his boiler suit pocket, he couldn't help himself. It was just lying there. It has begun to change shape and size. It expands. It contracts. Sometimes so fast he thinks it must be breathing. It plays on his mind. He has dreams about it, panicked dreams where he thinks he's dropped it or lost it. And then, during a restless, sweaty night, it speaks to him. A voice in his mind, though he knows it belongs to the box. A metallic ring to the edge of each word. What does it say? Cook for your girlfriend's parents. But why? The box wants information. The box is using this space mechanic, despite his unfortunate floating problem. The box asks him to get to know his girlfriend's parents because it suspects something about them. And the best way for this spaceship mechanic to speak to them at length and maybe have a little snoop around their house when he pops upstairs innocently to the bathroom is by offering to cook for them, in which case they'll naturally ask him to round to their place because their kitchen is so much bigger and better kitted out. So it's a way in. But what is this strange secret about his girlfriend's parents? What is stranger than him having to disguise the fact that he floats because he's a time traveller? Maybe this has something to do with why he was attracted to her in the first place. Otherwise, this would be too much of a coincidence to work into a story. Some detail about her background, her personal history, sparked an interest in the box as it listened from the spaceship mechanic's pocket. And it prompted the box to whisper to him, telling him how beautiful and intelligent she is. Why not ask her out on a date? Get to know her better. The box suspected, for some reason, something the woman said, that her parents were part of the Secret Service or maybe some other society or a rebel group. Spies? Something to do with time travel investigations? So the box registers them as a threat and prompts him to ask her out. And it's the beginning of this plan to get the spaceship mechanic to cook for the parents so he can spy around their house. Okay, I realise this is quite a weird one. Okay. So despite, oh yes, there's the floating problem. There's the floating problem as well. I'm crying slightly here. Sorry about this. Despite the spaceship mechanic struggling so hard to hide his floating problem, the box, who's really enslaved him in a way, must get him to find out more about the parents. So just looking back, taking a deep breath and looking back at the complete Exquisite Corpse, it wasn't really for his girlfriend or her parents that this guy is cooking, because the buoyant spaceship mechanic from 2150 cooked for the intoxicating box. Aha! Well, that was mighty bizarre. You might even say it was deeply weird. And this is no longer a sci-fi romantic comedy, although it's making me laugh. Maybe it is still, I don't know. But I mean, really, it's just a different play on the same basic story idea we started out with. It's turned into some bizarre spy thing. But it's all about focus, how you decide What should be the purpose of this story? What is the driving force? Do we want to find out who these parents really are, if there is a secret there? Are we involved in, are we psychologically engaged by what it is that the box wants? And what is this box? How has it intoxicated this man? Or are we all about the romantic comedy and the splashy soup and this guy trying not to float? So much going on there. So aside from these two approaches to one crazy exquisite corpse, what have we had before that today? Quite a lot of floating. What's that about? Do you want to explore the adventures of an outcast wizard plotting his revenge, which will of course involve a series of flights in a flappy cape? Or are you drawn to the wild hog's perspective in this story because you never know, that could be a shapeshifter? Yeah, one of his ex-colleagues or something. What are they up to? Or do we have a creepy cottage in the idyllic countryside where a dairymaid sharpens her fangs in anticipation for new visitors? Do pick up your pen and have a play. But what word combination should I choose to invite your ideas on for the next show? Let's see. Do you know what? What about the intoxicating box? What is this strange trinket? Or is it a treasure chest? Or even an origami box made of nothing but paper? What does it contain that is so intoxicating? What kind of magic lies within? Let me know what you think. Drop me a line. Just find the contact button on the footer of any page at annatizard.com. And keep those words and ideas coming. Until next time, go forth and be inspired. I hope you enjoyed today's Brainstoryum. You can find out more about Exquisite Corpse and my series, The Book of Exquisite Corpse, at annatizard.com. Subscribe to my e-newsletter and you'll get Volume 1 for free. And while you're there, why not submit a few words to the Socks of Destiny on my play page? You may inspire me or inspire yourself to write a unique new story. See you next time.